Mr. Ottaway's lesson note says that most of you are up to part 2. I'm going to give you a lesson on part 2 so that you can do it with my rules, how I teach it, and then you can do part 2. And then there'll be a recording of the video on YouTube on your lesson notes. The adding, subtracting, multiplying, division, because he's told me that you've done that, I'll assume it's done. But after my lesson, if you need help with it, I'll go around. I won't record that. Does that make sense? Yeah. So the way my lessons work is anything in black is just for me to help teach it to you. Anything in blue is what you should probably get down. Okay? I can't force you to get anything down, but if you want to have aura like me, you need to hustle. You need the grind set mentality, okay? So this is what the blue explains how to do it. And then in purple, I'm going to show you how to do it. Does that make sense? So if you're a tradie, if you're a barista, people aren't just going to give you printed notes to make a coffee. Because after they've given you those notes, they show you how to make it on the machine, and then you practice it so you get, what is it the kids say, get good at it, okay? Because you're going to stuff it up the first time. So part 2 of your little booklet, which I'll hand out, is about rounding. This is literally the lesson that I'll give to my 11 general maths kids. They're doing it next. So at SACE level, which is what you're at, you need to be consistent with rounding. Because if I did 1 divided by 1, you don't need to copy anything just yet. If I said 1 divided by 7 is 0.14, is that correct? It's close. But what does the calculator say 1 divided by 7 is? 0.142857143, etc. See how it goes on forever? If I say that 1 divided by 7 is just 0.14, have I lost accuracy? Yes. So every time you round, you need to tell someone that you rounded. That might be why the Northern Expressway, when I saw it getting built, they built it and there was a gap in the middle. Because if some engineer didn't tell them that they rounded, there's this little bit that's missing. Okay? So what I'm going to teach you is how to round properly for SACE level. So whenever you write an answer, you need to indicate when you've rounded it and by how much, and this is how you do it. So these are the steps. I'll give you some time to write these, but I'll talk it through. The following rounding rules will be used for the whole year. I use this in year 11. I use it all the way through year 12 as well. What's the first step? Decide how many decimal places you need to round to. Get that down, please. Decide how many places you're rounding to. I can't force you to write. That's fine. You're young adults. You think you're all that. You don't realize that the power the teacher has is if you didn't copy the work down, you'll find out when you're taking the test. Huh? You're still going to be assessed. And if you stuff it up during the assessment, what are you going to do? See how that works? So the first step, decide how many decimal places you need to round to. The question might say you want to round to the nearest 100, round to the nearest 1,000. Step 1, another way to think of step 1 is you decide where you want to cut off the number to. Step 2, you actually look at the decimal place after the place you're rounding to. So in Western society, what direction do we read? In Western society, left to right. So let's say I wanted to round to the nearest 10th. I want to cut off there. But to decide how I round, I actually look at the number after it. Okay, that's what step 2 is about. So decide how many places you want to round to. I'm going to cut there. Step 2, look at the decimal place after you're rounding. If that number is less than 5, you leave the numbers unchanged and you just cut off. But if the number is 5 or more, you increase the number you're rounding to by 1 and then you cut off. So get those 2 down. It sounds a little complicated, but when you see how it works, you'll see that the steps are just explaining what you're supposed to do formally. Okay? Step 3 is what might be new to you. After you've rounded the number in step 3, indicate the number of decimal places you round to with brackets, and it says something dp. So if I wanted to round to 2 decimal points, what do you reckon I'd write in the brackets?
2D.
2dp. If I wanted to round to 5 decimal points, 5dp. If I'm rounding to whole numbers like tens, hundreds, thousands, I wouldn't write dp, I'd write tens, hundreds, thousands. Okay? Can you just get... I'll give you time to get those steps down and then I'll demonstrate it. So a couple of minutes. If you have finished, because you started early, talk amongst each other, just don't name names. I don't want to have to edit the video to get your names out of it. No identifying stuff that's going on YouTube. And there's that little star point at the bottom. When you're rounding to whole number places, you don't just cut off, you write zeros instead. Let's have a go. Let's see this example here. I'm rounding the number 153,625. We need to revise some stuff though. Hopefully in primary school you were told each of these little columns was something. Does anyone remember what the first column was?
Units.
Units or ones. Some schools said ones or units. So this is... So what would the 2 be in someone else? Units or ones? Tens. See how it's going up by, you're timesing by 10. So what's 10 times by 10? What would this be? Hundreds. Good. Sorry, my writing's pretty bad. So what would the next one be? What would the 3 be in? Thousands. What would this be? What's 10 times 1,000? How many bands do I have? I've got 10,000. 10,000s, this is 100 thousands. So let's apply my rules. Step 1, I want to round this to the nearest 10,000. Look at my rules that I'm giving you. Decide how many places you need to round to. That's what the question is telling me. It wants me to round to the nearest 10,000. So my cutoff point is like here at the 10,000s. Step 2, look at the decimal place after the one I'm rounding to. What number is in the place after where I'm rounding to? What number's in the place after I'm rounding to? 5 is where I'm rounding to, but what's after it? 3. So I'm looking at this. I'm looking at 3. And then I'm making a decision. If the number's less than 5, you leave all the numbers unchanged and you just cut off. Okay? But we're doing whole numbers here. When you're rounding to the whole number decimal places, instead of cutting off, you write zeros instead. So Instead of cutting off, I'm writing zeros instead. So your answer is going to be 1, 5. And instead of cutting off, I'm writing what instead? Zeros. How many places am I filling? 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 153,625. That's rounded to the nearest 10,000. Using my rules. What about the nearest 10? I'll give you time to write after, okay? If I'm rounding to the nearest 10, I want to cut off there at the purple. What number do I actually look at to decide though? I'm not looking at 2.
5.
I'm looking at 5. And according to this rule, what do I do if the number is 5 or more? I increase the number you're rounding to by 1, and then I cut off. So what's 2 going to change into?
3.
It's going to be 3, and then what do I change 5 into? Because it's whole numbers, I make it into a 0. Okay? So this is going to be 1, 5, 3, 6, 3, 0. Do you see how the rules just apply to this? What's missing? Have I put anything in brackets yet? So this one I rounded to the nearest 10,000. This one I rounded to the nearest 10. Because I'm telling whoever's reading this that I don't have the exact answer. I have the answer and it's been rounded to the nearest 10,000. Or it's been rounded to the nearest 10. Because, do you agree? The actual number is this. Right? That's the real number. This is close, but I lost accuracy because I didn't want to write all that crap. Okay? Can I give you some time? Get down to this star, get what you need, and then I'll show you how to do decimal places, and then I'll shut my mouth and I'll upload. All right, get that down, please. Anything in purple would be nice too, but I can't force you to write anything. We'll just do the second example, A and B together. I'll give you some more time to write. Start talking again in class. Right, let's try this one. So we're going from whole numbers. These are really big. Is that a big number or is that a small one? Small, we're talking decimals here. But I want to try rounding the decimals off. So question A, I want to round this 0.142857143. I want to round it to 3 decimal places or the nearest thousandth. So now you spit out my rules back to me. I want to round it to 3 decimal places. So how many numbers do I want after the dot? 3. So I want to cut it off here. I want it to be cut off there, that blue dotted line. But what number am I actually looking at to make decisions about what I'm going to do? Am I looking at the 2? Or am I looking at the number after it to decide? What does step say? Look at the decimal place after the place that you're rounding to. So in this situation, am I looking at 8 to make a decision?
Yeah.
Good. Is that number less than 5 or is it more than 5?
More.
More than 5. So when it's more than 5, increase the number you're rounding to. So this 2 goes up by 1 to make, and then I just cut off. So what's the answer going to be? So that's going to be 0.143. Am I missing something? Do I have anything in brackets to indicate that I've lost accuracy? I need something there.
No.
What would I chuck in those brackets to show that I rounded to 3 decimal points? 3 dp. Get that one, and then I'll ask you one more, and then I'll hand out the booklets. I'll do this one in red. Have a look at it, see if you've got an idea what you would have for rounding it to 6 decimal places. Question? Yep. Where would my little dotted cutoff line be for 6 decimal places? Between what numbers?
7 and the 1.
Correct. I want to cut off to 6 decimal places, so I want to cut off between 7 and the 1. What number am I actually looking at to decide things? Am I looking at the 7 or am I looking at the 1?
The 1.
Not the 7, it's the place after where I'm cutting. So I'm looking at 1. Is that smaller than 5 or is it larger than 5?
Smaller.
It's smaller than 5. When it's smaller than 5, do I change anything?
Nope.
No, I just cut off. So that one's going to be 0.142857. Leave it alone. I'm missing some information. I rounded to 6 decimal points. I'll stop the recording there so you can chat.